Welcome to The Nonsense in the Chaos. I'm your host, Jolie Rose. We've just had the Venus full moon, and I held a ceremony online on Thursday night, which is something I started doing during the lockdown. I created a group called La Luna Coven for the Brighton Fringe Festival. It's an event that I used to do live pre-pandemic. It was an event where the public got to experience being in a coven for the evening. Throughout the month of May, which is the month that the Brighton Festival runs, on each of the 4 moon phases, so the full moon, the third quarter, the dark moon and the first quarter, I would have a coven ceremony in a beautiful walled garden, Sussex Square Gardens, where Lewis Carroll was fabled to have written Alice in Wonderland. It was a private garden that you had to have keys for, and people were quite interested just to come and have a nose at the garden. People would come in, and I would work with a team of women each year. It was a different group of women each year to teach them about how to be priestesses and step into their power and be archetypal. Each of them would be responsible for a night, and they would explore that phase in the feminine cycle. So the Virgin, which would be spring, and waxing moon after the dark moon, when the moon begins to form again, that waxing new moon as it grows. It's the east, which is air, like morning and everything that's new. Then you have fire, the south, which is the full moon. That would be summer, it's fire and this powerful mother, the mother. Then you have the wise woman, someone who's going through or just gone through menopause, a baby crone I like to call them, and that's autumn. And the waning moon, the west, which is water, which is wisdom. And then you'd have the dark moon, and that would be north, and that's the old crone, the death crone, so it's an old woman just before she dies, and that's the north and winter, and that would be nighttime. So all of these things correspond with each other. This is something that, looking at the cycles with Heather in the last podcast, all these cycles connect up with each other. With the menstrual cycle, the dark moon, winter, north, earth would be when you bleed, and then you have your nubile stage where you're just testosterone and you can go to the gym and you're feeling really strong. Then you have summer when you ovulate, which is the full moon, and then autumn, evening, waning moon when you're getting PMT and getting angry, and you bleed again with the dark moon. These cycles all correspond to each other, which is why the feminine experience does feel like it better reflects the natural world and the world that we're actually meant to be living in, rather than the imposed one that we're forcing upon ourselves, which is this kind of patriarchal version of reality that's linear. Obviously, it's actually a balance, because the balance between cyclical and linear is a spiral, and that's more in keeping with what nature is in itself. It's not just a continuous same as every time cycle. So this got me thinking about archetypes, because this last full moon, what happened was, after the pandemic, we started doing the coven online, because the Brighton Fringe got cancelled and we were all locked up in our houses in May. I felt like it was sad, and I felt like people needed that space for us to still do these ceremonies and hold this space, because it connected us with the outside world and the moon, which we could go and look at. You could do it in our hour's walk. We could go out at night and see the moon, and just to connect with each other and to something spiritual. So I decided to hold the moon ceremonies and advertise it through the Fringe as being an online event. And the priestesses that I'd worked with that year, we actually had Arts Council funding, and I got amazing costumes made by Louise O'Mahony, LOM, which is what the clothes, I'm wearing an LOM tracksuit in the video today. The colourful, beautiful clothes that I wear, and the priestess costumes that you might have seen in any photos to do with Beltane or Boomtown or anything like that. She made those for the online ceremonies during the pandemic. Since then, I've carried on doing them. Obviously, doing ceremony in person is so powerful. We had a women's circle last night in Sark for the Venus-Taurus full moon. The reason why it's Venus is because Taurus is ruled by Venus. Last night was a Taurus full moon. Meeting in person, it was beautiful. We were there for 4 hours last night, just chatting and drinking cacao and pulling cards and just, we held hands and did some Reiki work, and it was beautiful. So I highly recommend meeting up and doing work like this in groups, because it's so powerful. But it does work. The Zoom format lends itself really well to ceremony, because part of the problem with Zoom is people talking over each other, whereas with ceremony, someone's holding the space. So I go around and ask people questions. It's actually a really well chaired space when you're done in ceremony. So I love doing it. So, and they're free. All you have to do is click on the link. I put it on my social media each fortnight for the dark and full moon. I find it so useful because it is like grammar. And I was feeling my ADHD, I think I've got ADD. I was talking about it with my husband yesterday and we came to the conclusion that it's ADD. But I was in absolute full-blown overwhelm this week, which is a regular occurrence for me. I didn't know what to do. I was in a complete state. And then not going out this weekend and doing ceremony instead, especially working with Venus, who's my archetype, which is what I'm about to talk about, has completely reset me and sorted me out. And that's why I wanted to talk about archetypes today, because I feel that they're such an important and huge part of the medicine that I have to offer, and has been the most useful medicine that I've received. And it was something that they asked about in the circle last night, so I thought, actually, this may be something I should talk about a bit more, it will be more than one podcast worth, because it's it's infinite. This world is infinite. The archetypal realm is infinite and ridiculously beautifully yummy and full. And so I can only scratch the surface in talking about it tonight, but it's something that I'll enjoy talking about further with other people and looking at it from different perspectives, because it's just infinite. So the more perspectives that come to it, the better. So what I'm talking about when I talk about archetypes isn't Carl Jung's version of archetypes, although he was the first person, I believe, to coin the term. So absolute nod to Carl Jung. What he was talking about was a set of archetypes that are to do with, do you know what? I actually don't really know, because I've not studied it. I haven't studied his thing. Whenever I've gone and looked at it, it's not what I'm talking about, but it is where it began. I think it feels almost like a set of cards or something with these set characters on, and he was calling out something that already existed, because Commedia dell'arte has archetype. It uses archetype, and so he was only kind of naming something that already existed. But he's the person people assume I'm talking about when I talk about this work. And this work has become more known in recent years. I'd say since the pandemic. So in the last 4 years, I've started to see other people talk about it, which is interesting. It's a collective consciousness thing. The world is obviously now ready to talk about this work. Let's unpack it and start to talk about it from a different perspective, which is what seems to be coming through now. When I see these kind of new age things discussing it, they're definitely looking at it more from the perspective I've been working with. So my introduction to this work was through Jonathan Kay and The Fooling. I've been doing this work since 2002, so it's 22 years. It's the juiciest bit of the Fooling structure. Fooling is an architecture, a structure that we get taught, like a martial art, that we have to keep doing again and again so that we can do it without thinking. This structure is basically the architecture of theatre, of all theatre. There isn't any type of performance that doesn't fit into this structure. So it has the audience, which are number one. It's a 7-stage piece of structure. You have the audience who are number one, and if you're starting in the audience as a fool, you're getting up from the audience and you're jumping over the pit, which is the orchestra pit, but is, if you imagine like the void, like this terrifying thing to do, to just jump up out of the audience and jump onto the stage, which is number 2, and turn around and face the audience with nothing prepared. Who would do that? So that's the fool stepping off the cliff into the unknown on the tarot cards and stepping onto the stage with nothing prepared. What an idiot. What a fool. You get up, stand, and you face the audience. Number 2 is the narrator. It's commentary, chatting to the audience, proving that you're a normal person, even though what you've just done is completely crazy. This is where stand-up comedy happens. This is where anything where you're facing the audience and acknowledging the audience existence, like a compare or anything like that, all happens in 2. Then there's 3, which is having talked with the audience, you've gathered some bits and bobs and you've set up a series of stages in number 2. You create a diving board that dives you into a play. So the audience knows where they are, what they're doing, who you are, why you're about to go into this play, and where everything was laid out. So you set that all up and then you disappear into this play. And that's number 3. And number 3 is fourth wall theatre. You don't see the audience anymore. You disappear into this play and the audience knows where you are and goes with you, because you don't have any set or props or anything. You've just got the imagination. And so you go off into this play and the audience can see it because you've created it for them. And then at some point in the play, in number 3, it's called touch papers. Like, you touch on something that feels archetypal. And when you touch on that, it could be, so you set up a play, like you're talking to the audience and you say, has anyone been anywhere on holiday? And someone says, oh yeah, I've just been to Paris. And you go, oh, brilliant, what was Paris like? And they're like, oh, it was really nice. And you go, well, so here I am in Paris and I'm at a cafe and there's all these tables and there's a waiter over there and I'm sat at the table and I'm waiting and I'm on a Tinder date and I'm wondering whether this could be real love this time. And I'm hopeful. And then you go into the play. In the play, the archetypes that come up could be the archetype of love. Maybe something triggers you to step into the archetype of love. And you would do that at the back. So that's going into 4 in the structure. And number 4 is the archetypal realm. And in theatre, that is where Greek theatre used to happen. Back in ancient Greece, people would speak as gods and they would channel gods. They would speak in chorus and the audience heard them as gods. These archetypes rode the person, the human being. When you're in this space, you move slowly and speak as if you are infinitely huge, and you slow right down and you are a channel for whatever comes through. The more clear and concise you are with love, and you being the archetype of love, and then you speak from this place of love. Open your heart. Open and bloom like a rose. That deep desire for connection. The stalks and tendrils covered in thorns of fear, of rejection, reach out, desperate, searching. But then the bright, glorious sunshine of your light illuminates my face and I curl open for you. There is such joy. There is nothing like it. Something like this. So that's just what came through when I spoke. That would all be in 4 and you would speak from this place and then you'd go back into the play, which is 5. So you've been love and you go back into the play and interact in it again. And then you come back and talk to the audience, which is 6. And 7 is getting back into the audience. And 7 is like, if you've ever watched someone perform in something or do something and they're a bit of a celebrity to you, there'll never be a 1 again. 1 is just audience. But if you've seen someone go on that journey and do a thing, they'll never just be a 1. They'll always have this glamour of 7 about them, this magic of 7. And so that's basically the falling structure in a nutshell. But this realm, this archetypal realm at the back is very interesting and there's a lot to it. And as a paradox or as a question, so when I say here we are in Paris, you will all have a vision of Paris. And if I went around the audience and asked everyone to individually draw their version of Paris, they would all draw something different. But yet I can perform in front of it and you'll all have a general, like you'll all know what Paris is. You know what the feel of it is. And that's the archetype. So there's an archetype of Paris. And say, for example, the archetype of a supermarket, like here I am in front of a supermarket. The question is, did the idea of a supermarket come from the archetype and plant itself in the head of an audience member who went off and designed it and drew it and created the supermarket? Or did the audience member create the supermarket and then that created the archetype, which we then all know and understand? So do you see what I mean? There's like this relationship between the two. So there's the outer world, which is us, the humans, the everyday people, the everyman going about their business, who make things and design things and do things. And then there's the archetypal realm, which is the dreaming, the inner world and the imagination. Somehow they connect and feed into each other. In the middle is all the world's a stage and the men and women are merely players. They play their parts and you have entrances and exits. And within your lifetime, you play many parts. That whole Shakespeare quote is this bit in the middle where you perform on the stage. And so not only is this architecture that we're taught the architecture of theatre, but you also then realise that it's the architecture of our life, of the universe. It's the whole thing. And the archetypal realm is collective consciousness. So the fact that other people are suddenly talking about archetypes in the way that I'm talking about them is because the time is right now for this to happen, which is interesting and exciting, because no matter how terrifying the world is, something massively juicy and interesting is happening. And I think many of us feel this, like the feminine, the divine feminine has awoken and has risen in an unfathomably huge way. If you listen to my podcast about geomancy, the one I talk about the ceremony, the ayahuasca ceremony I had, the concept of the divine feminine that the shaman talks about, and I think this was like 2016, that was the first time I'd ever heard that, and now it's commonplace. I feel like most of us have considered the idea that we're all aspects of the goddess, if the feminine, whether you're male or female, but the feminine aspect is all an aspect of the goddess, and the masculine aspect is all an aspect of the god. The universe is the yin and yang, this dance between these two energies with a grey area in between, where there's a crossover between the two, where the gender just even disappears. Yin and yang has been around forever, but it feels like the period of time we're in now is more balanced. We've had patriarchal rule for a long time, and I don't think it's going to become matriarchal. I feel like, and I hope, that it's about it becoming more in balance with each other. And that feels like it's happening. And that's really exciting. I feel like non-toxic masculinity is also absolutely happening. That was a concept that was new not that long ago, which is exciting. It just feels like huge shifts are happening. Things have really shifted. It's obviously terrifying and doom and gloom, and it's easy to fall into that place, but sometimes it's important to step back and go, do you know what? Also, and yes, but these other things are happening. And I feel like there's a lot to be excited about. What happened was that Greek bit, that number 4, this bit at the back of the theatre, got cut off and got made set. That's now the set. So if you go watch a play, you've got the audience, you've got the orchestra pit, you've got the stage, and then you've got the set. And that bit got given over to religion and spirituality, and it got sent to the churches. And then the churches, with the Reformation, reduced the theatrical elements of it. So it was like, get rid of the incense, get rid of the stained glass windows, get rid of the Latin. Hearing it in Latin meant that you didn't actually hear the literal stories, which was way more believable and cosmic, because when you actually started to hear the actual word for word English stories of the Bible, that's when people went, huh? I beg your pardon? Sorry, what did you just say? And that's when people started to question things. Whereas when it's in Latin and it's more of a metaphor and it's more of a theatrical performance, then you're believing more in the theatre of it. It was the archetype. That the more that was stripped away, the more people fell away from believing in it. And logic, the Enlightenment, that happened, where we became disembodied. It's good to have gone down that road. I think we needed to, because we needed to strip it right back to basics, because so much dogma and corruption had layered on top of spirituality. And I fully believe that all roads lead to the same city when it comes to spirituality. We all have our different ways of getting there, but at the centre of all faiths and religion is this kernel of divine beauty, of truth. And it's just it's different cultures and different ways of metaphorically talking about something that is metaphorical. You can't physically, literally talk about it in a straight, direct way, because it's not that. The dreaming is this liquidy, oily, multicoloured gloop that's forever shifting and changing and is undefinable. We can't possibly understand it, but there is so much that we do innately and intuitively understand when we get out of the way, when the thinking gets out of the way. There are so many things that have been proven in science, or like the double helix of DNA shows up all the time in hallucinations, and the ayahuasca is a double helix vine. You see it when you're hallucinating, and just things like that. There's so many connections that are there. Like, for example, animals know instinctively which plants to eat to treat themselves. If you send a cow or a horse out into a field and it's not well, it will eat the herbs it needs to heal itself. We could do that. We could have done that, but because of our thinking, we can't do that anymore. When I spoke to the shaman who did the ayahuasca ceremony with me, I asked him about the Amazon. Did people just go around trying things willy-nilly? How did you discover ayahuasca? How did that happen? And it's like, you don't go around just trying things out. That's a very outer world perspective or reasoning for how you would do things. We talk to the plants. We communicate with the plants. They sit with the plant and they communicate with the spirit of the plant, and the spirit tells them what its healing properties are. Now that seems completely mind-bending to us, but that's because we don't have that kind of relationship with the natural world. That is the dreaming, because the dreaming is collective consciousness, and believe it or not, Gaia and the world is conscious and is part of that. And that's the most wacky wow thing I'm going to say, but it is, I do firmly believe that, and it's been proven to me more than, I was a born again Christian for ages. I'm not dissing Christianity. I know people have had profound experiences that support them with their faith, but I have myself had that with the earth. And even if you strip it back of any of the fact that for me, I now live a completely different life with the most beautiful man I've ever met, having the most amazing time. It feels like I walked the pilgrimages and connected with the land. It felt not like a gift, but also predictable outcome of living more in tune with my natural world, that I would be more in tune with my inner nature, which is my archetype. Therefore, I would live a life more in tune with who I really am. It's not so much like, oh, the universe gave me a gift. It does feel a bit like that. I walked these pilgrimages and gave the earth a massage and attention and intention and love and devotion. And then I got a dream life in return. So in a way, it feels like a gift, but also I am now living more in tune with who I am as an entity, as a being, and therefore my life reflects that. I can always strip it back to being more logical and linear if I need to, but this is the most wild part of me, is that I 100% have a sentient relationship with the earth, and that's my truth. That's what's happening for me. And I really urge people to connect with it, because she's there. She's definitely there. We're on her. We're standing on her. I'd say it's a much more inspiring and nourishing way of dealing with this climate crisis, to have a loving, intimate affair with the earth rather than beat yourself up for not recycling. Deepen your relationship with her. It's better for your mental health as well. She's the gift that keeps on giving, and that's the thing that has happened this week. I connected with Venus, who is my archetype, and that's nourished me because I follow the moon cycles, and the moon cycle in the zodiac was in Taurus. The moon rose in Taurus yesterday, and therefore this full moon is in Taurus. I only know because I started following astrology since 2020. I can go to the observatory, get the telescope out and show you that now. When I was just an atheist who believed in science, I couldn't have told you that. I didn't know anything about where the planets and star movement was. So my astronomy is vastly improved by adding the art department of astrology onto it. And the reason why I know Venus is my archetype is within Fooling, the most sacred work we do is a thing called the circle play. And the circle play is where we sit in a circle, having all spent a lot of time working on our question, which will always be twisted because we're coming from an outer world place. And we'll ask this question and we work Jonathan to untwist it. And then in doing so, we have something that hits an emotional gong. And I've talked about this in a previous podcast. So the example I used was someone said, why do I never feel like I'm in my power? And then the untwisted question was, who's in my seat of power? Who's in my throne of power? And then they went into a play and looked for it. Now, when we do these plays, you could stand there and go, I don't know what to do, because you're just standing in a circle in front of people. There's no props and you can't use the audience. We're not an audience. We're just witnesses. You can't like play off of us. You're not meant to try and make us laugh. We literally are meant to just witness. We're not meant to react at all. So it's about you going into your inner world. It's actually a more profound and potent experience than doing ayahuasca, because with ayahuasca and with any hallucinogen, you're taking something, and yes, that takes you on a journey, but to do it off your own back using just your imagination is so deeply profound. That's what happened with the circle plays. They could go on for hours. We would just hold the space until the person was done, and you would go into this play and we would guide with asking questions. Slowly and gently we would ask questions, mainly letting you get on with it. But if you feel lost or off point, then we'll pull you back, right? Normally just by going, what is your question? And reminding you, and you'll come back to that. But you'd basically just go and explore. And it could be that something's happened to you that's like a traumatic experience, and a way of freeing up your perspective on that experience will be to replay it, but then to play all the parts. Maybe play the part of the person who's hurt you or upset you or done something to you. We've had people play the trees, we've had people play the penis, we've had people play the son watching down, the father, the mother, all of the different parts in that story. You play them, and then it means that you're performing from a different perspective. We can stop and ask the mother, how do you feel about this situation? And go into the inner world of that person as well. The more you do it, I've done 3 circle plays, not that many. The same with ayahuasca, I've only done it twice. I like only doing these things occasionally because I feel there's such a profound impact that I don't want to do it all the time. It's a bit like reading tarot cards all the time. The more you do it, the less powerful it will be. In my opinion, everyone's got their own journey and can do whatever they want. But for me, I'd rather the potency be something that's occasional rather than all the time. And what you get from doing these plays is you start to notice that you have a flavour, and also observing other people. So when you're witnessing other people's, you witness that they have a flavour. And so in a very outer world way, it would be like typecasting. In this play of life, you're not going to get the same parts as Denzel Washington, John Travolta, Helen Mirren, Judi Dench, or whoever there is. You're not necessarily going to get the same parts as them because you're physically in an outer world way. You don't fit the characters because you look different. But in an inner world way, it's your archetype, because actually that's more important. You could not look like Kate Winslet, but archetypally you're the same, and therefore you would be cast for the same parts. It's the inner atmosphere of a person, and there aren't that many archetypes. As we sort of say, there's probably about 12, but there might be more than that. It is things like the Carl Jung list, which is the trickster, the love, like Venus. So Venus Aphrodite is the sexual woman, sacred whore, I suppose she could be called the sacred whore. There's the mother, the businessman, the Jobsworth Malvolio in Shakespeare. With Fooling, we would learn what our archetypes were, and then they would be for us to kind of play with. So once you know it, so for example, I realised Venus, the sexy woman, the strumpet, is very much my strongest archetype. And I say strumpet because there's like femme fatale, for example, which is a very different type of sexual woman. But I'm not a femme fatale. I don't have that energy. I have the working class, rompty-dumpty, Nancy from Oliver Twist, the landlord's daughter from The Wicker Man, Miss Piggy, Pat Butcher, Barbara Windsor, Nanny Og. I'm round, I'm cuddly, I'm warm, I'm friendly, and I'm a working class hero kind of thing. Most of us are not clearly just one archetype. We often are a mixture. Some people are very clearly. Jonathan Kay is a fool. My ex-husband was a trickster. In Commedia dell'arte, the trickster Harlequin and the strumpet Philomena hang out with each other. Quite often the storylines are about the businessman and the magician, and all these important, grandiose men are normally chasing after the woman and getting tricked by the trickster. And so they often then have these points where they'll be out the back having a fag together, hanging out, like having a laugh at how stupid these guys are, and then go back into the storyline and perform it again. The fact that I got together with my ex had this interesting relationship because we were archetypally these people that would hang out and have a fag together. I am always really drawn to tricksters. When I meet a trickster, I'm like, I know you and I get you. It's useful to know your archetype because it gives you permission. So in this world, there's so much choice, there's so many options, it's quite overwhelming. And by going, okay, I'm this bunch of stuff, as are a bunch of other, like there's loads of Venuses wandering around. I think of it almost as if, using that as a metaphor, if life were a computer game or a play and they were the puppeteers, it's the person playing the game. There's some sexy badass bitch playing the game of life up above us, and she's got a whole bunch of avatars. She's got thousands of avatars, and I'm one of them. And so when I say I'm part of the goddess, there's the overall goddess, which is all of the female archetypes. Then the facet that I am is a Venus facet. So if you were to take this jewel there's this huge inner divine jewel, and half of it's masculine, half of it's feminine. Within that, there's a facet of Venus, of Aphrodite, of this sexual female. And I'm one of them. I'm within that bit, say, and I'm within the pink hue of this jewel. You can see all the other facets through it. So all the other archetypes are within us. You can play any part, which is why when you play the circle play of your inner world, you can be all the parts, including being a bridge, a pine cone, fire, or love. You can be all of it, because everything in this universe is part of this. It's just that we're experiencing it as this subjective individual ego, which is great. Actually, the infinite part of us includes everything. And so that's overwhelming. That feels like too much. So to take your bit and go, okay, I'm here representing Venus. That means when I move to Sark and I meet this beautiful being who I completely fall in love with, who feels completely different to anyone I've ever met before or anything I've fallen in love with before, and it's scary because this is new, but I really am intrigued and I think it might be the one. Oh, but he's really young. He was 20 at the time when I met him, and I was 41. But because I'm the landlord's daughter in The Wicker Man, that's fine. Because, I'd often be like, in my head, I always go, what would Dolly Parton do? And I'm like, chuck a bit more glitter on it. You can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter. And I'm just like, my archetype's allowed to do this. Younger men are going to fall in love with me. I'm going to fall in love with them. That's fine. It's part of my archetype. I'm just going to own it. And things like wearing red, like I'm wearing this red tracksuit today. I surround myself in red velvets and silks and satin because my house is a temple to Venus. I'm a goddess on earth, and my surroundings should reflect the goddess of Venus. It's about making your life a work of art. That's what I mean by the dreaming is coming back into our world again, because we separated it and put it in churches. And we said, we're only going to go there on a Sunday and dip our toes into this on a Sunday. And then the rest of the time, we're going to do this patriarchal capitalist thing where we just go to work and we sit in strip lights in some god-awful grey room that stinks, that's got some horrible worn-out lino on the floor. And we're going to do some banal job on some plastic grey phone, looking at some horrible screen that's screwing our eyes out. We've been sold a trick because we're not benefiting from that in the slightest. We've been tricked into believing that we might earn enough money one day from doing that to have the life that the rich people who are telling us to do that have. That's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. You can bet your bottom dollar that those rich people are having spiritual, amazing inner and outer world lives. They're going to be doing retreats. They're going to be doing yoga. They're going to be connecting to their inner amazingness. Even if it's really like Donald Trump or someone, he's probably part of some kind of Mason cult where they put on cloaks and do something that makes them feel spiritually powerful like wizards. You can bet your life they're doing that. It would be for the same reason that we meet up and do women's circles. It's to connect to this inner power that makes you feel like you're a god and a goddess. We all are. You can do it for nefarious reasons, or you can do it for a positive reason that you can be more of a support. And I want to live in a world where everyone shines. I want to live in a world where everyone knows their archetype and is living as their archetype, because what an extraordinarily brilliant world that will be. What a compassionate and passionate and extraordinary world that would be. And that is what I live for. That's my dream, is that. I want that. So I want everyone to feel like that. I don't want it to be just like, I've got this to myself. I don't want to shine on my own. I want the whole world to shine. This is the bit of me that shines, the goddess coming through me and me letting it come through and owning it and celebrating it and not apologising for it and going, do you know what? This is just who I am. And sometimes archetypes are hard. Like I've got a friend whose archetype is the weasel and he's owned it, right? So that's not an easy thing to be. He's a Hollywood star. He was the Weasley guy who gets beaten up in the Craze Brothers film by Tom Hardy. He's been in massive films. He's always the sex offender, or he's the paedophile, or he's this weasel character in the Craze Brothers film. But he is hilarious. He's a right womanizer. People adore him. He's just great fun. And he's owning his archetypes, because basically it's going to be there whether you like it or not. So it's either ruling you and playing you like a puppet, or you're a priest or a priestess of it. And that's when you get the other side of it and you go, right, because I had a moment where I wrote a poem to my archetype, Desire, to the goddess Venus. I wrote a poem to her and told her to get lost. And she did. For a decade, I had no sex drive and felt very unsexy. And that made me really sad because I'm a priestess of Venus. So obviously that's quite a big thing to lose in oneself. And yet my desire didn't go. It just turned into a desire for a child and doing IVF, which was a very unsexy process. It was only when I came out the other end of it that I initiated myself as a witch and as a priestess of Venus. That was my path. It's actually called the Rose Path, and the Mary Magdalene was part of the Rose Path. When I initiated myself and I invited desire back in again, boom, there she was, straight back. And I was like, I am ever so sorry for having banished you. And I suddenly realised that desire was there still, but instead of it being for sex and sexuality and romantic passion, it had just gone into wanting children. It just transferred and was beating me up in a completely different way. And it was a really unpleasant experience. And then to come out the other end and be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to be the sexual being that I am, and then move to Sark and then meet my partner. We've been together 4 years and it's still like absolute honeymoon stage. We desire each other so much. It's such a loving, beautiful, very tantric, stunning relationship, and I love it. That feels like, yes, the pilgrimage and connecting to the earth, but also fully stepping into and owning my power as an archetype and as a goddess. I think everyone should explore it. I do run a course where I help people to do this called Which Fool Are You? And I do that in June in line with Gemini. It starts with the Gemini dark moon, because it's connecting with your twins. This inner and outer world relationships, the twin effect, and you've got your outer world twin, which is Cain, and your inner world twin, which is Abel, and Cain's always murdering Abel. So how to be a parent of these two twins. I use the energy of Gemini to kick off the Which Fool Are You course. And when I was saying about us being a mixture, it's not necessarily that we're just one archetype. My archetype is Venus, strongly, but I also have the triple goddess Hecate in me as well, which is the darker part of me, the more witchy bit of me. But within that, she's the triple goddess, so she's the Virgin Mother and Crone. Children think I'm a child. I'm on some level with children where they just think I'm a child. Same with mothers. So I've got a very motherly quality to me, and I'm really interested in birth. I've trained as a doula. I'm interested in supporting birth. I love that whole thing. The birthing part of it, the mother part of it. I'm happy that I didn't end up having children personally. That's worked out well for me. But I still am very passionate about motherhood and birth. And then the crone as well. I get on really well with old women, and there's an old soul in me. I just feel like I kind of am the Virgin Mother and Crone, even though I'm none of those things. And then there's another part of me, which is the gay man, which is what I've said in the last podcast, where I feel like I've got a male experience that was very recent. He felt like a gay, performative, artistic man. When I dress in drag, I look like George Michael. The reason why I call it Ing, which is the god of fertility, of masculine fertility, and it is transformation. And I'd say that's my skill. Like, that's the thing that what I'm bringing to the table, is that I'm really good at transforming people's lives. I can go from nothing, like the Beltane Festival. I started from absolutely nothing, no money, nothing at all. And out of nowhere, I pinged a festival into existence. This will be the third year coming up in May that we'll be running. There's like an alchemisty element to me, which is a creative masculine energy where the sperm pierces the egg and it pops and it transforms and it will never be the same again. And the pilgrimages that I do and things like that, I create things that transform people's lives and reality. Basically, I flip reality on its head and show people that things aren't just what they seem, which is what this podcast is about and what Fooling's about and all of that. And yeah, so Ing for me is Elton John. It's all the gay performers like David Bowie, all of that. So what happens is you connect to what the sort of God version is, like Venus or Ing or Hecate, and then you look at the lineage coming down and where that shows up in different ways, like who are your inspiration. Oh yeah, sorry, I've got another one as well, which I only really connected into this year. It was this year's Which Fool Are You that I connected into, and I was like, oh God, I can't believe I hadn't really taken any notice of this. And that was the warrior. I am a warrior, as in like a fighting warrior. That's Boudica and Mary Magdalene, Tiffany Aching and Lyra from Dark Materials. So again, that's the childlike element in me, is there's a childlike warrior in me. But then also the strumpet is a warrior. You can mix them together. Mother as whore and whore as mother are very different, because mother as whore is a mother who's been forced into prostitution to look after her kids. Hora's mother is a prostitute who's found herself pregnant and now having a baby. It's the same with warrior as strumpet and strumpet as warrior. A warrior as strumpet is a warrior who's maybe using sex a bit in, it was actually the joke Viking film, I can't remember what that series was called, The Norsemen, I think it was called Norsemen, and there was the sexy woman in that, and she would rape the men and be this kind of warrior strumpet. Like, she was this warrior who was very sexual and terrifying, which was brilliant. And then the strumpet as warrior, which is more like Nancy from Oliver Twist, where she's a loose woman who is fighting the good fight, and that's where I am. So you play around with them, you mix them together and play around with them, but that's not an introductory level. First of all, work out your main archetype and then start exploring the blends of the different ones you've got. It's a big thing, and I've been doing this now, like I say, 22 years, and only this year did I go, oh my God, I've been ignoring the warrior. And it was interesting that was in my blind spot, because I'd say that's the one that I'm the most apologetic for, because it's the one that fits least with being female. I am fearless. I'm completely fearless. And I feel like that's slightly embarrassing as a woman. So, oh God, sorry, I'm fearless about things. I do apologise. That was my most awkward one, really. And that was the one that I've only just got round to going, oh yeah, and I'm that. So yeah, that's a brief introduction to archetypes, and on that note I am going to pull a rune. If you enjoy this podcast, then please consider supporting me. This is becoming an absolute obsession and passion, and I spent a lot of time doing it. I love doing it. The people I interview are fascinating. The narrative that's forming around it is just filling me with joy and delight. I would like this to be my full-time job. It's currently a part-time job, but I want to keep exploring it and developing it. I'm interested in starting a podcast for Sark as well, Sarkcast. So just exploring further this world, and also I want to create audiobooks as well for the books that I've written, and I've nearly finished my next book, part of a new series called Walking with Autumn, which is about the pilgrimage walks. And the first book is the first pilgrimage I walked on my own, where me and my ex-husband split up and led me to moving to Sark and meeting my new husband, who's an absolute joy. So I would like to get that out and published. All of these things take time, and I have to do a day job working in a pub to make ends meet. If I was able to work as an artist fully and not need to do that, then that would be amazing. Being a patron is being a patron of the arts. We live in a world where the Arts Council is hugely reduced. I was able to make a living for the last 20 years. I didn't do an extra job. I've just lived as an artist, and that's because I was able to get 3 or 4 funding bids a year through the Arts Council to support me to create work, and that work is all community focused. This is doing things like leading pilgrimages, where I take 20 people out and they have the most amazing life-changing experience, but also we walk through 50 communities and we transform and change people's lives in all the communities that we walk through. And that's what art's about. Art is to make you realise that life isn't just the tarmac and the Greggs Bakers and the feral pigeons. Life's not just that, and life's not just Trump. Imagine the amount of people who are depressed at the moment and also feeling lonely and scared, and all of the things that happen off the back of just this 24-hour news and incessant outer world nonsense. Art is there, and artists are there to bring people back in to their hearts and heart space and go, look, there's more than this, and here's community, and here's connection, and here's the dreaming, and here's the inner world. We can do this, and we can do this together. But artists need to get paid. We don't get paid. We were getting money through the Arts Council, but that's basically gone. It used to be that you get 3 or 4 a year. Now I reckon it's 1 every 2 years, and you can't live on that. I can no longer live on it at all. So art has to be subsidised. There isn't a culture in the world that has ever been able to survive without being funded and supported. It was one of our main exports. It was one of our biggest industries, was the creative industry. We've now had a good 6 years of it being absolutely bled dry. So we're probably now starting to see the repercussions of that. There aren't any pop stars or artists that are out there now that aren't rich. The last time that you can see the crossover of where the Arts Council and the funding stopped was when we stopped having the Brit scene. You know, the Kate Moss, Pete Doherty, Amy Winehouse Tracy Emin, all of that lot, that was when the Arts Council was funded and there was loads of money. That was the sort of stuff that was happening, and we were a huge export to the rest of the world. And our culture was the cool culture, and that was what we're doing. And other cultures that have that is France and places like that, where people are supported and funded and appreciated. So that's why when you travel to these places, you're like, oh, there was this really cool folk thing, and then this happened, and there was this festival and a parade. The reason why that happens is because the government and the people support it and fund it and make it happen. And you can see that we stopped doing that, and we stopped having edgy, interesting artists that weren't just rich. And now we have very banal output. I'm sorry to say, that's how I feel about it. And I saw it at the Edinburgh Fringe, where there was no one doing anything interesting. It just became something that rich people were able to do. This is what Patreon is good for, supporting and helping artists find another way to make a living and make art that isn't relying on the Arts Council. If you're able to help, that would be amazing. If you are, then it's patreon.com/Jolie Rose. And that can be £3 a month, which is basically getting us a cup of tea to say thank you for listening to this podcast. Or there's one that's £9 a month, and that's getting the videos and extra free content. You can watch the podcast. And if you can't do that, then please just tell people about it. Share far and wide. If there's the ability on the platform that you're listening to it on to like it and review it and give it stars, and do that. But just tell people about it, share it. That would be amazing. So thank you, and on with the show. Okay, let's see what we've got. Birch, New Beginnings. So this is the silver birch. It looks like a bee. It's meant to be a bee. And this is... So the silver birch is a pioneer tree. So if there's been a forest fire, it's the next thing to grow, the new thing to grow. And I suppose for what I'm talking about, the archetypes and what's going on in the world, it's about new beginnings. We are entering into a vastly important new beginning, which is happening on the 19th. It's the 17th now, so this will have come out by the 19th. So on the 19th, that's the day where Pluto enters Aquarius, and that is the end of the Capricorn age. In terms of what we're talking about, Capricorn is patriarchy, it's institutions, tradition, but it's also expertise and grounding and leadership. Trump getting in is kind of like the last death rattle of that age, and in a way it's better that he got in because he's openly evil whereas all of the left-wing options are still completely under the thumb of corporations and are just as evil but pretending not to be. I still think it's much better that we've got Labour in power, and probably it would have been the same in America as well. But in a way, it's clearer. In capitalism, our chains are invisible, which actually makes it kind of harder to fight. Trump's visible chains. He's a visible enemy. He's visibly, openly being awful. So that makes it easier to fight against in a way. With the Capricorn changeover on a global scale, which Pluto is, because it's the furthest out planet, it's the slowest moving planet. I know it's not a planet, it's an asteroid, but in astrology it's a planet. It's global scale stuff. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and the American Revolution. So we can expect revolution to happen in the next 20 years, one can assume. But in a more personal way, what have you become an expert in the last 20 years? What are you a leader in? I was giving this example last night at the Women's Circle. My husband is training to be a chef. In the last 20 years, he's been learning to be a chef, but he's not a master of it yet. That's something he's been learning to do. In terms of what he's an expert at, he's 24 and he is so comfortable in his own skin, like absolutely 100% comfortable in his own skin. It's a really warm and pleasant quality to be around. Men, young boys, children on the island are inspired by him. He wears pink. He has pink dreadlocks. He dresses as a glitter wizard. He has this big pink wizard hat. He's really tall. And instead of being hunched over and hiding and wearing all black, which he used to do, instead he is up tall, bright pink, wizard hat on, sequins. But he's not a show-off. He's very quiet. He's very polite. He's quite shy. He's got a really gentle nature about him. He's a genuine being, and he's just genuinely comfortable in his own skin. And it's very warm and lovely to be around. And that is his expertise. So he's an expert in that. And this new Aquarius age is like, what is it that you're an expert in? I'd say I'm an expert in being the nonsense in the chaos. I'm an expert at transforming people's realities. Like, that's my thing that I'm bringing to the table, holding space for exploration into the unknown and putting on things and doing things that just completely flips the script. And so that's my thing I'm bringing to the table. And this new beginning is, now that we've done that for the last 20 years, we've become experts in whatever it is that we're experts at. That this next phase is Aquarius. It's like stepping onto a travelator. We are going to fly, and it is air, and it's ideas, and it's entrepreneurial, and it's revolutionary, and it's just absolute. It's the absolute opposite of Capricorn. Capricorn is heavy and still and do things the way that they've always been done, and all of that. And Aquarius is, we are going to completely change everything, and it's all new and it's all cutting edge. So everything's going to feel a lot faster and a lot lighter. And so this archetype thing is really useful, because to tune into that and tune in what your archetype is, and to come from this archetypal realm and to be connected to and delving into and learning about and exploring this inner world that connects us with nature, that connects us with each other, that makes us all one, then suddenly there's this woof, and we fly with that. Wow, that's going to fly, and that's really exciting. So I just feel like it's all to play for in a way that there's never been before. There are so many moving parts. And it's that, I've mentioned this in one of the earlier podcasts with Megan, Alan Moore, who wrote V for Vendetta, which is where the anonymous masks came from, those Guy Fawkesy masks. V for Vendetta is a brilliant film. It's the right time of year to watch it. Highly recommend it. It's like a modern day Guy Fawkes story. He wrote that, and he's written lots of brilliant books that I absolutely adore, graphic novels. His book Jerusalem is the best book I've ever read. It's 10,000 words longer than the Bible, and it's just about Northampton, but within it explores the whole of the universe. So when I'm talking about us being in Paris at this cafe, you could play the cup, you could play the sugar, and you could go into the archetype of coffee and slavery, or you could go into the archetype of chocolate and love and Venus. All of these things, they're all there within that cafe. You don't have to go anywhere else. It can just stay within the cafe. And a linear story would be, you're at the cafe, you have a coffee, then you go somewhere and you make love, and then you maybe get married, and then you have children. The inner world is that you explore all these things by just staying at this table with this coffee cup and this person that you've met, the Tinder date. So he does that with Jerusalem. It's just him donutting into Northampton, and through it he does the angels, he does the ghosts, he does every famous person who's ever lived there, he does all of the pottery that's from there. Like, he literally does the whole history of there. It's amazing. He's a self-proclaimed wizard, and he said the Neolithic period was ice, and that was us being ice, and that was for hundreds of thousands of years. I think we've been around for like 200,000 years as what you would call human. We then entered into water probably about, well, I don't know how many thousands of years ago. The Aborigines got to Australia 10,000 years ago or something, I think it was. It might be longer than that, it might be 30,000 years ago. But anyway, we've then started moving around in boats and became water, and trade opened up, and all of this kind of movement of people started to happen around the world. Now with Aquarius, which is air, we're turning into steam. And this is because our memory storage is doubling exponentially, inventions are doubling exponentially. He was saying how, if you think of the period of time between the first axe head being invented and the first arrowhead being invented and then the wheel, these inventions had thousands of years in between each other. And then that sped up to now inventions double exponentially. So every year it's exponentially doubling the things that are being invented. That's madness. Knowledge storage, all of this stuff is doubling exponentially. We have no idea of how that is going to play out. That's what this podcast is about. The reason why I want us to relax with the unknown and the nonsense of it all and the chaos of it all is because we are turning into steam, and we're stepping into this Aquarius age. How does one become steam? Who the hell knows? What I would suggest is we surrender, learn to relax, be present, breathe. We learn to relax with the unknown, because that's what this is. It's unknown. We're going to have to do our bit, take that step forward, trust and be loving. Make your pixel in the bigger picture as bright, vivacious, joyful, loving and open as possible. And if enough of us do that, we'll change the picture. You can only change your pixel. So this is a new beginning. It's a mega new beginning, and it's full of possibility. And yeah, that feels dreadful with Trump getting in and it all feels doom and gloom, but actually that's the catalyst. It needs to happen. This all needs to happen. Trust it and concentrate on your bit and just, love. Do it all from a place of love. So that brings me on to the Chaos Crusade for this week, and that is for you to keep doing things differently. I'd say have a cold shower. So for this week, have a cold shower every day. I'm going to do it. I go swimming. I go swimming in the sea. So I don't do that every day, but I'll make a commitment for this week as part of the Chaos Crusade to either have a cold shower or jump in the sea and go swimming every day this week for a week. Because that is the unknown, unless you already do. If you already do it, then do something different. Walk different routes to work, or walk to work instead of driving, or change your morning routine. Do something that changes things, because it's this thing of breaking the known. We need to learn to work with the unknown and trust the unknown. And to do that, we need to do things differently. So blasting yourself with cold water is a really good one. It's just something that wakes you up and makes you be present in a way that otherwise you just wouldn't be. So I'm going to commit to that. I'm going to have a cold shower or swim in the sea every day this week. I invite you to do that. If you already do that, do something else instead that's completely different that you're going to commit to for a week. So that's everything for tonight. Thank you so much. I've got 3 incredible people that I'm interviewing in the next 2 days that are just... So I'm going to do all 3 interviews and then see which one feels right to go next. And then, I'm going to England next week. So I'm going to be recording these and doing these in advance so that I can edit them and get them out while I'm away. But I'm probably going to try and interview some people while I'm away. I'm going to take my microphones and stuff with me because it's always nice to chat to people on the road. I've got the kit to do it now, so we'll see what comes up from that. But amazing stuff. The Archetypal Realm is so vast. This was just a tiny little scratching the surface, and we will talk about it more. I'd like to talk about it with others that explore it so that you can hear it from different perspectives. It's as infinite as there are humans. There ever have been and ever will be. And it's even beyond that because there's all the other things as well. I've just given you a taste of it through my perspective. But there's more to go. So that's a little taste. And I hope you have a lovely week. So I shall see thee anon.